Just as a reminder, evangelism is spiritual warfare. And let me share with you from 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 through 5. For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. That's really something we need to remember as we evangelize our neighbors and friends, and it's especially appropriate as we continue on in this series on the tactics in defending the faith. And if you'll remember, Michael and Scott have shared with us recently the Columbo approach, and asking questions is a great way to get a conversation going and to have the other person do most of the talking. And Michael and Scott has taken you through the first question, which is really the idea there is to get information, and the key question there is, what do you mean by that? This week we're going to look at and start looking at the second question, which is, the second is to reverse the burden of proof. How did you come to that conclusion is the key question. And one of the interesting examples used here in the material we're using to share with you is what's called the professor's ploy. Some professors are fond of taking pot shots at Christianity with remarks like, the Bible is just a bunch of fables, even if the topic matter has nothing to do with religious issues. Well-meaning believers sometimes take the challenge and attempt a head-to-head duel with a professor, but this approach is rarely successful. One rule of engagement governs exchanges like these. The person with the microphone wins. Never attempt a frontal assault on a superior force. The professor always has the strategic advantage, and he knows it. Don't get into a power play when you're outgunned. There's a better way. Don't disengage. Instead, use your tactics. I want to share a second verse with you from Matthew 10:16, where this is really underscores the fact that we're in spiritual warfare and we need to use wisdom. Matthew 10:16 says, behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And that's what using these tactics are all about. So, when you approach a situation like this where you think you're being outgunned or the other person has the advantage in terms of their background, like a professor, a good way to start that is to ask a question like this: Professor, what did you mean by that? That way it puts the burden of proof in explaining it back on him rather than you trying to defend a position. A next question could be, how did you reach that conclusion? So make him, the teacher or the professor, the one making the claim, shoulder the burden of proof. This approach enables you to stay engaged while deftly sidestepping the power and struggle. The professor's ploy comes into play when he attempts to make you shoulder the burden of proof. He may sense your maneuver and respond by saying, you must be one of those Christians who think the Bible is the inspired word of God. Okay, since I'm a fair man, why don't you prove that to the rest of the class? That could be a typical example. So in one quick move, he's cleverly switched the burden of proof back to you, the student. Don't fall for this unfair move. You aren't the one making the claim, he is. He must defend his own claim. He's the teacher after all. So you can respond to the professor's ploy with dignity and tact. When he shifts the burden of proof on you, calmly respond by saying, Professor, first, I haven't revealed anything about my views. Second, my views don't really matter right now. You're the teacher, and you've made a strong claim about the Bible. I'm just trying to learn your reasons for it. So you can turn it back, make him share his views and where he's coming from, and division and really defend the position that he's taken. So those are some ideas. I think it's important to remember that we are in spiritual warfare when we're sharing the faith, and we need to be, as the Word of God says, wise as serpents and innocent as doves while we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. It's almost certain that if you spend time talking to people about Christianity, you're going to run into the claim that the Bible's not true. And I've heard that many, many, many times. And I've heard the claim there are contradictions in the Bible. And I try to always respond in the same way. And every time I've gotten the same result. If I say, okay, would you just give me an example of one? I've asked that question to many people from all kind of walks of life on different continents. And guess how many people have ever come up with one? 0. And that's when I say, but you know what? If there was one, we would all know it. It would be common knowledge if there was a way. Because the world has been working on this for almost 2,000 years to prove that the Bible is not true when it is grounded in history, when it talks about this happened at such and such time in history when a ruler was in place, whatever it is. It's so anchored in history and reality. And so people have been trying to disprove it. And if there was a proof, then it would be common knowledge. In fact, by now, the discussion would probably be off the scene, but it's not. And there is no contradiction. There is no proof that the truth is not true because the truth is true, right? By definition. So thank you for that, Roger. That's very helpful.